Super Mario Galaxy released on the Nintendo Wii back in 2007 and was followed by its sequel, Galaxy 2, some 3 years later. Both games have just released on the Switch in remastered form. You can buy them separately or as a bundle. It's that bundle that we're going to look at today to see just how they hold up. So will these games take you to a new galaxy, or is it more like they will suck your money into a black hole? Well, thank you to Nintendo for the review code, and now let's find out. Let's first look at story then, and in Mario Galaxy 1, Mario is invited to watch a comet pass at the Centennial Star Festival at Princess Peach's castle. On arriving though, he finds that Bowser is attacking the castle with his fleet of airships and a flying saucer, and actually lifts the castle up into outer space, kidnapping Peach in the process. After a short battle, Mario finds himself cast out into outer space, where he befriends Luma, a small star-shaped creature, and is introduced to Rosalina. It transpires that Bowser has stolen the Power Stars from this observatory, and Mario agrees to get them back to aid Rosalina and ultimately rescue Princess Peach. Galaxy 2 has a similar setup in some respects. Mario is once again invited to the castle to watch the Star Festival, and again finds Bowser attacking the castle, this time in supersized form. Mario again finds himself in space, looking to obtain Power Stars, but this time aboard a huge planetoid-sized ship created in his own image. Let's have a look at the gameplay then for those of you that haven't played either of the Galaxy games before. And in terms of their chronological order in release dates of 3D platformers, they come after Super Mario Sunshine and just before Mario 3D Land and Mario 3D World. The reason I mention this is because these games actually play a lot more like the earlier 3D platformers, Super Mario 64 in particular, in terms of their basic setup, than they do the ones that have come since. This almost feels like the last bastion of Mario 64 before the 3D formula was changed a little. In practice, this means that every time you collect a Power Star, you'll return back to the hub world, being either the Comet Observatory in 1 or your huge spaceship in 2. The more stars you find, the more domes you unlock in Galaxy 1, and within these you have access to new galaxies, each with a set number of levels, whereas Galaxy 2 goes for a more traditional world map view to get you progressing through the game. The camera is much more fixed than it is in the 3D platformers you'd play nowadays, again much more akin to something like Mario 64. It turns in increments of about 30 to 45 degrees, and there are times when you just can't turn it at all. Whereas in 64 it was down to the technical limitations of the time. In this one it does seem a more deliberate choice, owing to the fact that the level designs in these takes on a more spherical nature. You are of course in space in a number of different galaxies, and this is used incredibly well to set up some fantastic level design. In both games, the level design is top notch. You have times where you are running around a spherical planet with all of the physics-based challenges that this would bring, whereas at other times the lands look more like you would expect, but because of that space nature, they can really push the envelope and go to places that the other games couldn't really go when designing their level layouts. As much as I am a staunch fan of Mario 64, and it is my favourite 3D Mario game, I can't deny that the level design in these two games is just on, well, another planet quite literally. New costumes and power-ups were also introduced in these games. One of the most iconic, I would say, is the Bee Mario suit that allows you to hover and bumble about, flying for a short period of time. And these new power-ups were a breath of fresh air at the time, really injecting some life into that well-found formula in the 2D and 3D Mario games. You also have a lot of the same moves from those original 3D games, with new moves also introduced, such as the ability to do a spin move that you can use to stun enemies. As well as this, you'll be collecting star bits that you'll find in great frequency in levels, and one of the ways that you can use these is to fire them at enemies, again stunning them, so you can then go in to defeat them properly. Now, because these were Wii games originally, they of course used Wiimote functionality, meaning that you used the Wii Nunchuck in one hand and pointed the remote at the screen with the other, and you could literally point at these star bits to collect them. Now, because the Switch has gyro functionality built in, this is still possible in these remasters of the games. It doesn't work as well as it did on the Wii, owing to the fact the Switch doesn't have a dedicated sensor bar, and you will have to reset the pointer at times by pressing the R button. I'm going to be honest and say that I would have been quite happy for them to have a way to turn off any sort of gyro or motion sensor controls and just collect them in a more traditional way. I understand why they were in the original games. It was, of course, a big selling point of the Wii console. But now that that time has passed and the whole waggle era is over, I wouldn't have minded not having to point the controller at the screen. Having said that, it still works well enough. Now, in the original game, you would also at times had to shake the Wiimote to power Mario up to launch himself from particular stars. Here you can still shake the right Joy-Con if you would like, but you can also just tap the Y button repeatedly if this is more comfortable to you. And again, I would have rather just had a single button pressed have this happen these days. I just don't think it's necessary to carry over those waggle functions or even repeated button presses. I think they could have had an option to just turn all that off in these remasters. There are some difficult boss battles in here as well, some that will really have you pulling your hair out but feeling that sense of elation when you do finally beat them. Both games offer a decent challenge. I would say on balance the second game is possibly a little bit tougher than the first. And we'll touch on the second game a little bit here. For the most part, they are very similar. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that Mario Galaxy 2 initially was going to be more of an extension of the first game, to the point it was going to be called Super Mario Galaxy More, and that idea changed when they came up with more ideas and made it a fully fleshed sequel. But you can still see the similarities between the two games. The major difference really in the second game is the inclusion of Yoshi as a character. This does change up your approach to particular levels, and again it just allowed Nintendo to go so much bigger with their level design, adding a further sense of verticality as you used Yoshi's tongue to swing across platforms and make your way up various obstacles and overcome challenges. And while a subtle change, it really does add a lot to that second game. I would say the second game is superior to the first, but both are well worth playing. Now, there was a two-player mode for both games back in the day where player 2 controlled the pointer on screen and therefore could collect more of the star bits for player 1. It wasn't particularly interesting back then, and I don't think it's particularly interesting right now, although it's still here, so if you want to play with a second player, you can at least. And if you're playing in handheld mode, then you can use the touchscreen to collect those star bits or do any of the other pointer controlled parts. And I do believe you can also use the gyro sensors within the console itself if you have a Switch Lite, for example, and can't detach the Joy-Con, so you can still play the game to its fullest. Gameplay is fantastic, quite simply. It's one of those games, or two of those games to be precise, that just haven't really aged in terms of their core gameplay mechanics. I would go so far as to say that in terms of pure gameplay and level design, these are better than Odyssey. A bit of a hangover from the Wii era in terms of some of the shaking mechanics, bring it down a tiny bit, but gameplay gets 19 out of 20. Controls, very similar really, work very well, but do show their age a little bit. You will feel the restrictions of the camera at times, and I wouldn't have minded a way to turn off some of the more pointer-centric moments, but on the whole, they get 18 out of 20. Let's move on to visuals and performance. Now, both games certainly exude that Mario charm, that typical Nintendo quality, and that was certainly ramped up to a larger scale from where we'd been before back in 2007, and then of course again in 2010. They were good looking games for the day, and in these Switch versions, the upping of the resolution allows them to shine in a way that they couldn't back then, when I think they were probably displaying at about 480. You've got native resolution if you're playing on Switch 1 and up to 4K if playing on the Switch 2, 60 frames per second across both. I would say though that the 3-year gap in between 1 and 2 releasing, you can see the difference in terms of things like character models that looked a lot better in Galaxy 2 than they did in 1, albeit both look that bit better now, just through being able to be displayed at a much higher resolution. Those extra pixels really do make the difference. The Galaxy setting and the number of different worlds that you'll encounter is also another reason why visuals is a highlight, although I would say there's a lot of repetition in assets across the two games. Again, if you know the story behind what 2 was going to be originally, then this is understandable. And if you were playing them 3 years apart as you would have back in the day, it wouldn't have been such an issue. But going straight from 1 into 2 and seeing a lot of the same enemies, it does feel as perhaps Nintendo could have mixed things up a little bit more for that sequel. I do feel that more could have been done to really make these games shine these days. Yes, the upping of the resolution does help because they were such good looking games to begin with, but in an age where many companies are now starting to remaster their games, Nintendo do still lack the, willingness, I guess, to really go the whole hog and make some of these games shine in a way that's appropriate for just how fantastic they are. They did it with Metroid Prime, that feeling more of a remake than a remaster, but on the whole there is a reluctance, it seems, to really put that extra step of effort in. Moving on to the audio, and I will say first and foremost that I am more of a fan of traditional video game music than I am of orchestral scores that have become more commonplace in these last few years. Back in 2007 though, they weren't common at all, and it was probably Galaxy that started that trend off. I can't think of many other games around that time that would have done it. And I think the fact that this is set in space means the orchestral score actually suits these games perfectly. It's a case for me of I don't think the tracks are as memorable as some of the 3D platforming music of the games that came before. I could hum Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine tunes now in my head. I can't really do that with Galaxy, but whilst you are playing in that moment and everything comes together to create one complete package, the level of grandeur and the sense of wonder that that orchestral score provides to what's already happening on screen is almost unrivaled. This goes for both games, and in this remastered version you can listen to the music outside of the games themselves. Visuals are still impressive to this day, and the up-res that they've received certainly aids in this, but I do think this is an area that could have seen a bit more love. On the whole, they get 17 out of 20. Audio, on the other hand, is just as fantastic to these days as it was back then. There's not much they could have done to improve this really. It's top tier. It gets the full 20 out of 20. Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 cost £58.99 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. As I mentioned at the beginning of this review, you are able to buy the games separately on the eShop and they sell for approximately £33.99, or again, of course, your regional equivalent. Now, I will say straight away that I do think this is too expensive. However, I will reiterate that that's not anything to do with the quality of the games. These are quite possibly the two best 3D platformers ever created. And to get them in one bundle for that price on face value sounds pretty decent. My issue with it is that they are, of course, remasters of games that by this point are 15 and nearly 20 years old. And I just don't feel that Nintendo put the appropriate amount of love, care, if you want, into these remasters that other companies do. You had Yooka-Replay release recently. Now, bearing in mind that that game had a lot more to do based on the original release to make it really highly polished, whereas here, not so much was needed, but more could have been done. And I do think it's a shame, bearing in mind these are tied into Mario's 40th birthday, that Nintendo never just go the extra mile and give these games, these amazing games, the love and care they deserve. On top of that, there's just not enough extra in here. Yes, there are additional chapters for the Rosalina's storybook sections. I think there's an epilogue in 1 and possibly 4 new ones in 2. There's an assist mode and other bits and bobs. They've made sure it's compatible with things like the Switch Lite, but they could have really gone to town and highly polished the graphics, for example, added some behind the scenes, documentary style videos, retrospectives, that sort of thing. It's not even really a proper package. When you buy the bundle, you just get the 2 games they download separately onto your Switch. That's the disappointing side, but on the upside, you just can't deny that these games are incredible. And it's a tough one to score, but on balance, value gets 14 out of 20. To conclude, Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 are quite simply fantastic games still to this day. The quality of the games saves this as a package. There's not a huge amount of remastering going on here. Yes, they have upscaled the resolution. Yes, there are a couple of bits here and there. Yes, they have added some modifications to controls and thought about ways that you can play it on a Switch Lite, for example. But there's not a lot of love here, and this is where Nintendo get me. For a company that is so loved, why don't they show that level of love back to their fans when they make these sort of releases? Remasters are becoming very common these days. Plenty of companies are doing them, but other companies seem to just go the extra mile. Unfortunately, it seems that those other companies do, these days, What Nintendo don't? Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 get a SwitchUp score of 88%. So there you have it. The fact that these games are just so good means that it still scores very well, as it should. These games are fantastic, but come on Nintendo, just throw us a bone when you do these remasters, add a bit more content in there. It doesn't even have to be gameplay related, it can be bonus features, just to let us see the process behind the making of such good games. If you are not aware, we do have a second channel now, SwitchUp Extra, that is just starting to grow. There's only a few videos on there at the minute. A lot of the videos are going to be pure gameplay videos because we have had people say to us that this is something that helps them decide on buying games as much as reviews. But we are going to mix it up a bit and have some gameplay videos or initial impressions videos with commentary from the both of us, just basically having a chat, bit of banter between us as we're playing. And the most recent video is exactly that. If you want to give that a watch, I'll put a card to that in the top right hand corner. If you're looking for eShop credit to pick this game up, you can use our website. Don't forget, switchup.gg, and get your eShop cards from there. Doing so will get you 5% of your purchase price back as cash back, and it helps the channel out. And there's links down there to places such as PlayAsia, where using our link and code will save you a bit of money off of a purchase if you're looking to import any games. Thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.